There's definitely reasons in some crops to worry about cross-pollination. But when you're dealing with flowers, what you're going to wind up with is different combinations of shapes, different combinations of colors, and those can be really beautiful and really interesting to look at. Welcome to episode 31 of the Seed Farmer Podcast. The podcast where I want to convince you to harvest seeds from some of the vegetables and flowers growing in your farm or garden, and then to plant the seeds out to grow delicious vegetables and beautiful flowers. If you enjoy the Seed Farmer Podcast and find it is a good resource that helps you improve your seed work and farming, please support the show at spreadsheet.farm/support podcast. The link is also in the show notes. I'm your host, Dan Brisebois, seed grower at Turnasol Cooperative Farm and author of The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seeds. This is another solo minisode, and they're going to be minisodes throughout the next month or so, and really focused on trying to convince you to get seed from your farm or garden if you aren't already doing so. And if you are already doing so, maybe to expand to other species and crops that you haven't been doing. And if you're already doing all these crops, well then just listen along and enjoy. So it's tough full-time farming. So I know you're all farming or gardening or doing other things and that on the side. And it's tough farming and running a podcast. It's been hard for me to get full-length interviews together in August and September, which is why I'm doing these minisodes. And what we're trying right now, and I say we because I'm sitting here with my sister, Molly Brisebois, who's been doing the post-production on these episodes, and I've been really, really grateful for that. It's one less thing that I have to think about. So we're sitting down together right now, and we're going to try to put together 2 episodes. So this one you're going to hear next week, this week in a couple days, and then the one after you'll probably hear next week if it's any good, and if we do carry through on what we're saying we're going to do. So that's kind of the plan of what I'm doing right now. It's a little bit different. The first part of the podcast, which is when we're right now, is I'm going to talk about what I'm doing on the farm. Today has been a day of cucumber seeds. Now, we've changed the way we deal with cucumber seeds at Turnasol Farm in the last couple of years. Previously, what I do is, we plant them in the spring, and then they start to be overripe and yellow and giant in mid-August, and we start to harvest them and put them in bins, or sometimes a big mega bin that we like a bulk bin that we have in either a greenhouse or a storage shed, and we just stock them up and then process them later on. And maybe we harvest 2 or 3 times until the field is empty, and then we can, till under that field. What we started doing last year, and maybe it's a little bit from lack of time in August, but what we started doing is I just left the cucumbers in the field, and I'd go out with the tractor or the electric vehicle, go out and pick up some cucumbers in a bin, put them on the wagon behind the tractor, and then cut each cucumber one by one, and basically cut it, scoop it out into a bucket with my fingers, and then drop the fruit on the ground. This is so different than what I used to do. So we'd have one person cutting the cucumbers into halves, trying not to kind of like cut straight through the middle to avoid cutting actual seed. And then we'd have 2 or 3 people opening them and splitting them, kind of a chain doing that. But now, like today, I started off going in solo, and I processed, 40 or 50 feet of cucumbers all by myself, just, cutting it, scooping it, putting it in the bin, and then going to the next one. And doing it this way means that I can stop at any point, and I don't have a big mess to clean up. I just have a bucket of cucumber seed and gunk. And then I bring that back to the greenhouse and let it ferment, and then 2 or 3 days later I can clean it. So that's been a real change, hoping to just have less commitment to the kind of task I'm doing at the moment, and being able to stop when needed to go to something else. Can have some stolen cucumber seed moments. So that's the big thing that's happening on the farm these days, or today. The other thing I wanted to talk about before we get into the actual episode is a couple podcasts I've been listening to. specifically because they have some great seedy content. And if you're listening to this, I just suspect that you like listening to seeds in your ears. So the first podcast I want to mention is, and then maybe these are from 2 weeks ago, but there's a new episode of Seeds and Their People with Owen from True Love Seeds, interviewing Sama from Rayhan Herb Farm. In the episode, Sama and Owen talk about sabzi, which is a bunch of different fresh green herbs that are eaten together during meals, which sounds delicious. One thing I really loved in this episode, I mean, amongst many great things in the episode, but was how she was sourcing the herb seeds that she then later propagated. It was just really interesting to hear about that. Another podcast episode about seeds that I loved was on the Growing for Market podcast. The host, April Parms-Jones, was talking with Michael Lorden from Organic Seed Alliance, and they were talking about plant breeding, and both in terms of what Organic Seed Alliance does and supports farmers, but also some individual farmers and what they're doing. And I mean, I just love listening to plant breeding stuff no matter what. And if you do, I think you should listen to that episode too. So those are two episodes that I think you could add to your podcast queue. And let's get on to the actual crux of today's episode. So today's episode, where I'm trying to convince you to go and get some seed from your farm or your garden right now in September when there is seed to be got, I want to talk about flowers, because I think cut flowers are some of the easiest things to get seed from, because there's probably already mature seed in your garden. Now, if you're growing cut flowers and you're trying to keep your blooms fresh, you probably go through and you're deadheading them, removing some of the ones that are past, so you always have a continuous sort of set of blooms. But it's hard to deadhead all of them, and there are some flowers, I'm sure, that you missed and that have gotten nice and brown. And that's what you look for, is you go out to your patch and you look for flowers or blooms that are all dried up on an otherwise nice looking plant. And there's a good chance that flower has then gone to seed. And some of them are really simple to look at. Like if you go for poppies or nigellas, you can just go and find those seed pods, and if they're dried down, you can shake it, you can hear the seed inside them. You just crush it, you can find the seed in it. It's quite easy. Other things like calendula, the seed's sitting on top. Some things that might be harder to know what the seed is, but like a zinnia, for example, if you have kind of a mostly dried up flower on it, you could harvest that flower and then later on clean it and get the seed out of it. But at this point in September, what you want to be doing is you want to be harvesting the flowers so that you can then extract them later on. Don't worry about getting the seed out right now. And just go through and, maybe it's asters, maybe ageratum, maybe anything that you see that has some dried flowers on it. You could take, some paper bags, and you could, if they're really dry, you could just toss that in there, and you could write on the outside what flower or what variety it is. If there's a little bit of moisture, then you want to maybe put that into an open bin or a bucket that you can let sit out in your greenhouse for a week or two before you might put it in a paper bag. If there's moisture in there, you really don't want that to mold in a sealed container. So you want it to dry up. But basically, just walk your garden and get those plants, cut the heads off, and for later use. Now, one of the things that people are always afraid about is cross-pollination. And in the case of flowers, you shouldn't be afraid of cross-pollination for two reasons. One is that if you were eating squash, so if you were growing squash and you had zucchini and you had pumpkins in your field and they accidentally cross-pollinate and you harvest the seed and you grow it out the next year, you could wind up with a squash that's maybe doesn't store well, or maybe a zucchini that's too fibrous. There's definitely reasons in some crops to worry about cross-pollination. But when you're dealing with flowers, what you're going to wind up with is different combinations of shapes, different combinations of colors, and those can be really beautiful and really interesting to look at. The ultimate reason I don't think you should worry about crossing is that you're going to see some possibly chance, exciting things that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. Now, the second reason I don't think you should worry about crossing is there's a lot less crossing than sometimes you might think. And we've been growing zinnias, for example, the last few years, side by side varieties, and I've been harvesting the seed from them, and I grow it the next year, and I'm seeing no crossing. And talking with a couple zinnia growers, I've not that there's no crossing at all. On our fields, there's been no crossing. Other growers do see a little bit of crossing, but just nothing like what you might expect. And so that's not necessarily true with everything out there, but I found that's true also with poppies. I've heard that about celosia too, though I have a little bit less experience with that. There's sometimes less crossing than I expect, and if there is, it's an exciting thing to do. And if you don't like a specific plant that's crossed up, don't keep seed from it next year. And if you love it, keep seed from that and see what happens the next year. That's kind of my appeal to you, is to just go out and get some flowers. Now, ideally, you should focus on open pollinated varieties. If you have hybrid varieties, you might get funny things the next year. I do know that I have saved some seed from hybrid sunflowers, and we've wound up with sunflowers that haven't given seed in like a next generation. So I don't know if there's like cytoplasmic male sterility or something involved in that. But start with OPs, start with open pollinated varieties. Now, when it comes to cleaning this seed, some things, but going back to the nigellas and the poppies, those are going to be very, very easy to clean. You just open the pod and shake the seed out and maybe pick out any big bits that you don't like. Other seeds, like if you're dealing with zinnias are definitely one that, to the unexperienced eye, it can be very hard to know what the seed part is. The first thing I would say is, if you don't know what the seed part thing is, you could go back and look in, if you have any old seed packs, look at what the seed looked like in the seed pack, right? What you started with is what you should be getting with later on. You could look online, use a search engine to find a picture of that seed. But then another thing is, the seed is generally the heaviest part in the flower bits. So even if you're not 100% sure what the seed is, if you winnow out the lighter bits, you should wind up with the heavier stuff, which will be the seed in pretty much all the cases that I can think about. If it's seed for your own use, you don't have to get it perfectly clean. Just getting it clean enough that what you have is mostly seed is going to be fine. And you can adjust your seeding rates based on having a bit of dirty seed. Or if you're planting into trays in a greenhouse, then you could just pick the good bits out, and with the good bits being the seed, and put them into those cells. So there's just some quick thoughts about growing flowers for seed, and a call to action for you to head out and go walk your flower beds and get some seeds from them. And I guess this is also the part where I plug my book. It's not my new book now. It's been almost a year out that it's been out, but The Seed Farmer, where I do go into depth in a bunch of different crops with pictures and stuff, and give more elaborate techniques and tools than I can give to you in your ears while you're just listening to this, driving or working or doing whatever you're doing on the farm. I think it's a fantastic resource to get going into seed growing, and if you're already there, to fine-tune yourself. So go and harvest some flower seed. And that's episode 31 of the Seed Farmer podcast. If you like this type of short episode, tell me about it. If there's something that you want me to tackle, tell me about it. Send me an email, send me a DM. Thank you to Seedy September for the theme music. You can hear more of their music at seedyseptember.com. Thank you to Molly Breezebois for editing this episode, and thank you so much for listening. You can find more seed growing resources on my blog at seedgrowers.farm. While you're there, you can subscribe to my newsletter full of seed growing, crop planning, and farm spreadsheets. You can also find out where to order a copy of my book, The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seed. And you can support the podcast at spreadsheet.farm/supportpodcast. If you haven't already subscribed to the episode, now's the time. You wouldn't want to miss the next episode. Until then, happy farming.